sketch class. What that means is the style of drawing we do, we don't start dark right away, because you're going to have no way to fix your mistakes. Instead, work light and sketchy, which allows you to make mistakes as you draw, and then later we'll go back and we'll darken in what we like. So don't picture like the film version of Stitch. Think of the drawings you saw in the hallway outside that are really messy and sketchy. That's what we're aiming for in this class. Are we ready to draw Stitch? Alright, let's get started. We're going to start with something that looks like a sunrise, a sunset, a half circle, whatever visual helps you. I'm going to start lower on my page with a horizontal line, and I'm just going to bring a tall rainbow from one side to the other. So it's like the opening scene in The Lion King. If you can see that, then you know you're on the right track. Keep this light, keep it sketchy, does not need to look perfect. You'll notice that when I'm drawing, I'm not just doing like a single line and then hoping it's good. People who sketch tend to do lots of lines. Give yourselves the option of what to go with. Any character you draw, though, is going to use construction lines because it helps you get their features in the right spot. We're going to place in a vertical line going right through the center of this gumdrop shape, so we have a way to kind of mirror his features. The bottom of Stitch's face is flat, but it's not this flat. So what I want to do is I'm going to pull from one side, and I'm going to create this really shallow letter U shape going from one side to the other here. So at this point, to me, it always makes me think of like a tortoise shell. That's kind of what we want at this point. The way that we draw characters, we use an approach called general to specific, which means we block out that silhouette first, and then we work our way towards the smaller features and the details. So the last part of his silhouette are his ears. Just above his head, I'm placing in another guideline of where to put those ears. And then what I like to do is I start about where that construction line is, and I start by bringing up some letter C curves up to that construction line. I'm going to do this on each side. So it's almost going to feel like horns on like a, I don't know, like a bull, maybe. So I'm going to place in these large C curves or parentheses here. But the shape we're going to want for the ears is a little bit more like an orange slice or a lemon wedge. So then I just pull from that C curve and I bring down this diagonal line back towards his face. And this is our basic foundation for Stitch. Are we starting to see him? Okay, some of you said yeah, a lot of you were silent. You're like, not at all. Fair enough. It's still pretty vague in general at this point, but this helps us get all of his features. Now that we have this, I like to start my sketch by placing in his nose, which gets placed right on top of where those construction lines meet. I would start by sketching in a circle roughly the size of like a meatball here. That's kind of the size you want for his nose. Even though we started with a circle, we don't want to end up with a circle for the nose because it is going to kind of look like Elmo. So I'm going to place in a flatter line for the top here. I'm kind of carving off some of that curved edge there. And then I'm going to flatten out each side. So we end up with something that's a very round triangle. It's not too sharp or angular, but unlike a circle, we will have three distinct points here. That's what we want for his nose. Inside of his nose, we're going to give him some nostrils, not only so he can breathe, but also because Stitch has a pretty unique skill that he shows us in the film. Does anybody know what he can do? It's kind of gross. He can pick his nose with his tongue, right? So let's add in those nostrils so that way he can show off that special skill here. The nose is actually going to be the first feature we're going to go back and lock in. And if you're not familiar with that term, it just means we're going back with darker line work here, and we're cleaning up our sketch, we're finalizing it, and we're using these dark lines to bring forward the features that we want to see in the final version of our drawing. Now keep in mind that locking in is, again, only intended for what you like. So if you make a mistake or something looks a little off to you, not a problem. Just don't lock it in, so that way you're not stuck with it. In addition to locking in the nose, feel free to also lightly shade in the nose. That's a great way to give your sketch some contrast. I like to use the side of my pencil for this, because it gives me a nice even tone. It also helps you shade in that space a lot quicker too. Now, Stitch is a hand-drawn animated character, and for a lot of characters animated in that way, they'll have little tricks in their design that help create depth and dimension. So one really simple way to do this on Stitch is to place in two curved lines above his nose, so that way it feels like his nose is slightly coming out towards us instead of feeling like a flat surface. And this is something, again, we do on a lot of characters. I think he's got a very similar idea. He's got a snout line above his nose. But one of the reasons I really like this character, and one of the reasons I have a suspicion he's really popular, is Stitch is really hard to put in a box. He's a very unique character because he is definitely not a villain, but would we say he's good? I don't know if we would, because Stitch is very destructive, and even at one point, Lilo draws his badness level, and it was alarmingly high. So again, he doesn't really fit in either camp. So with his expression, I like to show that. I like to show that he's kind of not fully good or bad. So I draw this really wide smile that just curls up at the ends. Most of it is just a flat line. And this kind of smile gives him almost like a sly look, like maybe he's up to something, he's mischievous, which again, is very fitting for Stitch. He was really designed and created to be destructive, so it's not really fully his fault. I'm going back and I'm locking in that smile, but we want to add in a bit more detail to make it feel a little bit more expressive. The first thing I'm going to do is place in some curved lines to the ends of the smile, so that way it looks like his cheeks are being pushed up. We do this on a lot of our characters. I also want to place in a bottom lip, so that way his face has a bit more structure to it. So I'm just going to place in this kind of letter U right underneath here. Now we all know he's an alien, but in the film, a lot of characters aren't sure what Stitch is. Nani thinks he's an evil koala, and then Lilo thought that he was a collie before he got run over. I don't understand that logic, but that's what she said. I'm placing in this indent connecting the nose to the mouth here, which makes him feel dog-like, which is kind of what most people in the film think he is. And to be fair, even though Stitch, again, is an alien, he was designed based off of the proportions of a French Bulldog or a Boston Terrier, dogs that kind of have those like squished faces. So again, he is kind of dog-like with this design. I'm going back and locking in the bottom of the face as well. We're not really going to change that at this point, so make sure that's nice and dark. But we want to start to bring Stitch to life, which really means we need to draw in his eyes and the space around them. He has a feature known as character mask, which means he's got this frame around each eye. The frames for his eyes start off with these large letter U shapes just above those smile lines, and you'll notice they pull from the side of the face to the nose. Once you've drawn in those letter U's, you then sketch lightly through the nose to bring up these tall arches on each side that land on the side of his face. So again, they should be kind of like these tall egg shapes almost, and these are not his eyes, these are the shapes around the eyes. We can go back and lock in the sides of his face and that character mask. When you go back to lock in the character mask, though, something to be aware of is the top of that mask also acts as his eyebrow. So we usually will go over this line a few times to make it thicker and darker, so that way it reads as his eyebrow. So you'll see on my sketch how I've done that here. Above his eyebrows, I added in some curved lines that act as like a muscle above his eyebrow. Again, Stitch is like an apex creation, essentially. He has heightened senses, he's really strong, so even his face has like muscle tone to it, which is kind of crazy. I'm going back and I'm starting to lock in the top of his head, but at the very top we need to add something. Going back and I'm starting to lock in the top of his head, but at the very top we need to add something, because he tells us that he's cute and fluffy, right? So let's add in like 3 tufts of fluff at the top of Stitch's head here. But we definitely need to add the eyes. Let's go back and add them, because that's really what's going to bring Stitch to life. Since he's an alien, he has eyes that are very typical alien as far as design-wise goes. They're like large ovals, and they're going to have mostly pupil in the eye. It's going to be almost entirely pupil. But we will add something known as a gleam of light, which means we're going to add a little tiny circle in the eye, and we'll shade in everything but that little circle. And again, this is something you see on a lot of alien characters, because we also draw Grogu and Baby Groot here, and all 3 characters have fairly similar eyes in that way. Now, every film that goes into development, especially animated films, they always go through a lot of changes while they're being made. And a lot of changes happen during Lilo and Stitch's production. One of the most significant changes is actually the setting of the film, which is pretty insane to me, because I feel like this film would be totally different if it was not set in Hawaii. Like the music, the characters, so much of this film is like really embedded within that setting. But the original pitch for this film, again, by Chris Sanders, he wasn't going to have Stitch lost on an island somewhere. He was going to get lost in a forest in like a Midwestern state of the US. And so they were originally going to set this film in Kansas, actually. Very different vibe from the film we got. But then they later said that they wanted to go with an island because they felt like that was more isolating to Stitch, so he couldn't just leave. That's what their reason was. Now, we at the Animation Academy have a theory. We think that's like not really the full reason, because we know that when animators choose a setting for the film, they get to do long, extensive research trips there, and they get to spend months in that location drawing and experiencing the location. So we thought they got really smart, and they thought, what if we set this film on the beautiful beaches of Hawaii, and of course we can go visit there for months at a time, all for research, of course. That's our theory. Who knows? Either way, it worked out because, again, this film is incredible, but I always find that really funny that they think that we're going to believe that other reason. I'm not buying it. I'm going back, I'm making sure the eyes are nice and dark here again, so that really brings Stitch to life. The eyes are the final step for his face, but we need to add in just a bit more detail to the ears to make it feel like it goes with the rest of the design. Any character you draw is going to have a fold in their ear that allows them to hear better. For Stitch, you've got these long letter S curves that pull from the top of his ear down to his cheeks here. So I'm going to do this on each side. And then the last detail we add to his ears before we lock these in is he's got little triangular notches taken out of the ears. This is something surprisingly you see quite a bit in animation because it's like a sign of like a scrappy character or a tough character, one that's lived like a rough past. So another example of a character with this is like Dante the street dog from Coco. Both of those characters have notches taken out of their ears. So pretty interesting. Go back, lock this in. And the ears are really the final step for drawing Stitch. So anything else that you choose to add is going to be considered extra credit. So if you think he needs like a background or maybe an Elvis costume, or maybe you want to draw him in outer space, have fun with your drawing, make it your own. The last step though, after you finish your extra credit, is you're going to want to find somewhere to sign your name nice and proud. Because you've drawn your very own Experiment 626. All right, now